Welcome to the first rung on the ladder of prestige Flybridge ownership. This entry-level model, which is also available as a coupe in the form of the 420S, is another collaboration between Prestige and its long-standing design partner, Gironi. Though it may look rather similar, there are some significant differences between this new model and the one it replaces, more of which later. For now, some stats. The boat is 42 feet and 10 inches long and has a beam of 13 feet and 5 inches. It weighs 10.2 tons light and has a fuel capacity of 1,170 litres. Engine options are both Cummins 6.7 litre diesels with either 380 or 425 horsepower for a top speed of just over 30 knots with the latter. Before we get into what it's like to drive though, let's have a look around. The 420 starts at £450,000, but this boat with the larger engines and a good spec on it is just over £550,000. So that spec doesn't actually include a hydraulic bathing platform as an option, but this boat doesn't have it, it just has this fixed one. But it's a really good size and it's nice and clear on either side, so it's very easy to step on and off from the pontoon. Down here in the transom you have some storage space. Very useful place to have some storage actually. That's a dedicated spot for the life raft at water level, which is very useful, and you actually have access to this locker from inside the cockpit as well through a hatch under the bench. Along here, this is where you find your shore power connection hidden away under here. You only have step access through to the cockpit on one side. That's because on this side there's a little removable step which gives you access to the passerelle if you have it fitted. So if you're moored stern to, you can step over there onto your passerelle and up onto the quayside. There's plenty to grab onto as you make your way onto the side decks on this boat. Not only do you have nice tall guardrails, but you have a nice upright rail here, and there's also a rail running all the way along the coaming here as you move forward. There's 3 steps in the side deck, one here, and then one slightly further forward, where you find your foredeck sunbathing cushions. They actually have flip-up backrests, so you can sit a bit more comfortably when you're sunbathing. And then you have your anchor, windlass, and the mooring gear, and you see the fair leads here with rollers in them. Under here is where you find access to the anchor locker. It's a shame that it's got nothing to tie ropes to up here. You could easily drop things down there and be very hard to get. It'd be nice to have some hooks either this side or that side, just so that you can lash things around them and they don't drop right in to the void. But you can see you've got deck wash here as well, which is quite useful. Now here in the cockpit you have this nice comfortable L-shaped seating here, and the table is mounted on telescopic legs, so you can quite easily adjust the height of it if you want to. The doors here that lead into the saloon, they slide both ways, so at the moment I've got them over to port, but you can slide them all the way over to starboard, which then opens up this little return here to make a bit of a bar between the galley and the cockpit. There's 2 ways to get to the engine room on this boat. You can either go through the cockpit hatch here, and that brings you down between the engines, so if you need to get down in there quickly you can get down. There's a little ladder there. I mean, it's quite tight and there's not a huge amount of space above the engines, but you can drop down nice and quickly and get between them. But there's also access through the saloon floor, more of a sort of inspection hatch that lifts up. Then again you have the ladder, you can drop down into there, and that brings you down in front of the engines, so you can get to them that way as well. And if you were to use some storage crates, you could have a bit of extra storage down here if you wanted to utilise that free space. And the most significant change between this 420 and the old model is that here you used to have a separate stairway down to the master cabin. Now you access that cabin the same way you do the VIP cabin through the companionway forward, which means that you have more space up here, and you also have a better galley which spreads across both sides of the boat. You have your fridge down here on this side. You can have an ice maker in this slot here if you prefer. At the moment it's just some storage, And you have the induction hob that side, your sink, and some more storage worked into these cabinets around here. As an option, the saloon table has a telescopic leg, so that will move up and down at the push of a button. That creates another berth if you want to, so you can sleep 6 people on board here if you want. If you notice, this footstool actually has a little screw in the deck here. You can undo that, and then you can move that round and put it this side of the table, so you can sit one more person around the table if you're dining inside. One thing I've noticed about this little love seat, it's a nice position, it's nice and sociable opposite the dinette, but it could come out a little bit further. It'd be more comfortable if it came out to the end of the helm seat. It's a bit short and a bit of a low backrest at the moment, so it's not quite as comfortable as it could be. It's more of an oversized single helm seat than a true double helm seat. At least the space underneath hasn't gone to waste. There's a bit of storage here. It doesn't have any sliding mechanism though, so you can't move the seat physically close to the dash, and everything does feel a little bit far away when you're sat back in the seat. The throttles aren't too bad, but in terms of using these screens, especially and seeing the flush mounted engine information screen here, is quite hard at sea. You have to lean right forward, even stand up sometimes to read those properly. If it were me, I'd probably have the joystick either in front of the throttles or further back, so that the throttle's a little bit closer to the helmsman, so that again they don't have to lean forward when you're going along. But it's good to see a good sized pair of cup holders here, so the helmsman can put some of their loose items in there. This panel is the slot for the television. It hasn't actually been fitted to this boat yet, but you can see that's where it'd go. You'd have a flat screen TV in there, which obviously faces back into the boat so that people around the dinette can see it okay. And you also have a 3 terabyte hard drive here, so you can store music and movies on the hard drive, and then you can feed them out to the boat's AV system. There is no longer separate access to the master cabin, so you come down the shared companionway. You have the VIP cabin right in front of you, but you turn back in yourself and you're into the master suite with a couple of steps down, and then you have steps up either side. But it's full beam, uses the entire width of the boat, and you have a really good sized double bed. And there's loads of storage in here, all along this side, storage cupboards. They considered fitting a chaise longue, but I'm glad they didn't, because you have more storage on this side as well. And of course you have the hull windows, which are down here at water level. And there are a few level changes. There's steps up either side, and obviously you have this intrusion here over the bed, but you could still sit up in bed and read if you wanted to. And actually the ceiling goes up either side of the bed, so you can stand either side, but you're going to have to duck to get into bed. A couple of other little issues. One is that you only have charging sockets on one side of the bed, so this person gets USB and a proper plug, but you don't get one on the other side, which is a bit of a shame. You have got hanging storage in here. It's not huge, but it's okay. You've got this split door which opens up to show a little bit of hanging space, which auto illuminates, which is quite nice. And then on the way out you can see the ensuite bathroom, which is a good size, proper shower door, loads of headroom in that shower there. And then you have your sink and toilet, of course. And one gripe I have in this area is that although they look really stylish, these are really, really sharp. And if you were to catch your hip or your thigh on that as you go through, you'd know about it. So they probably need to pick some slightly more rounded ones down here where it's a little bit narrow as you come out of the hallway here. This is the VIP. It uses a split door to make the most of the space here at the end of the bed. Now it looks like space is a bit tight here, but actually there's a section of mattress that pops out, and you can slide the end of the bed back so you have more room at the end of the bed to move around and get changed. This cabin has hanging lockers on both sides, on that side as well, and then you have elongated windows with an opening port, and of course you have the hatch overhead as well, so you can get some fresh air in here and even more natural light. Now, there are two options in terms of layout down on this lower deck. You can have the day heads here, which is ensuite to the VIP cabin, or you can have this as a sort of utility space / dressing room. But I think the 2 cabin, 2 bathroom layout will probably prove to be the most popular. Now, this boat is available as a coupe in the 420S, but on a day like this, the Flybridge is the place you want to be. Straight up to the upper helm. It's only a single helm seat and you sit quite low, but it's comfortable enough Everything's nice and clear and easy to use. Then you have dedicated sunbathing space here to starboard. You have pop-up backrests again on these sun pads, so they're a bit more comfortable when the boat is moving along. And then aft here you have your dinette, and that is served by a wet bar which has got sink, grill, and there's a fridge up here as well. Now you can have a hardtop up here. It's quite a small boat to have a hardtop. It doesn't do much for its looks, but it is an option if you want it. The better option is probably to have the bimini, which would fold back around the seating here, and then you simply fold it up and it gives you some shade if you need it on a particularly sunny day. So that's the tour. Let's go and give it a drive. Now, one of the major differences between this new version of the 420 and the previous model is that that boat used Volvo Penta IPS. This boat has a pair of Cummins 425 horsepower diesels on V-drive shafts. This being the entry-level model in the Prestige Flybridge range, they wanted to keep running costs low and they wanted to keep things simple, hence why they've reverted from pods back to more traditional shaft drives. But because they're on the V-drive setup, you still get a similar amount of space on the lower deck for accommodation. Now, how does that translate into the driving experience? Well, what you really notice about these 425 horsepower Cummins is the amount of torque on offer. From low down, mid-range, there is serious amounts of shove on tap, and it would be particularly helpful if you're on a big swell, helping to get the boat over the other side of larger waves. Now, what you don't get is the fly-by-wire super light steering that you have on IPS. The steering is a little bit heavier, it's a little bit harder work to move this boat from side to side. But once you get it going, it's really tenacious, there's lots and lots of grip, and it's quite a good amount of heel. It's a fun boat to drive. And what about performance? Well, top speed is around 31 knots. Cruising range 22 to 28 knots. It's probably more comfortable at the lower end of that scale. Around 22 knots feels like the most comfortable cruising speed, and that should give you a range of about 250 miles. It's also the quietest cruising speed. 22 knots, the engines melt away into the background a bit more. They can be quite noisy if you get it at the wrong speed. 25, 26 knots, they're making themselves heard. Higher than that, actually, they melt away again. But 22 feels like the most comfortable cruising speed. It's quite economical. Sound levels aren't too high. It's easy enough to have a conversation down here with the lower helm. Now, what this boat has is a £10,000 option, which is a joystick that gives you IPS style control on shafts drives. Obviously, it doesn't vector like the IPS does. It just uses the shaft drives and the bow thruster to give you the same sort of effect. It's not quite as slick as IPS. There's a bit of a delay. It takes a bit getting used to. Personally, with a boat like this, which has got these twin shafts, I'd much rather use the throttles and the bow thruster. But it's a nice option to have, and it's more familiar if you are used to joysticks or if you just are a bit daunted by using traditional throttles. Personally, I think it's so good with the traditional throttles that you don't really need to worry too much about it. One thing this boat is lacking is a side door. Now, not all of its rivals have it, but something like the Sea Line F430 has got it, and it makes a big difference in instances like this, because now I would be able to get out and help out with the berthing. At the moment, all I can do through this window is just shout at my crew. So that's the Prestige 420, the first rung on the ladder into Prestige ownership. The changes they've made over the previous model have made a big difference, and it may not be perfect, but for the money, it's a really impressive all-round package. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you on another test very soon.